The harsh, fluorescent lights of Zeta-11 facility flickered as Jace Novak stepped into the observation room. Cold metal walls surrounded him, decorated only by monitors displaying various training simulations and combat statistics. The air smelled of antiseptic and metal, a scent he'd grown accustomed to during his 3 weeks at the Apostle Processing Training Center, a fancy name for what was essentially a brutal repurposing facility run jointly by corporations and military forces. "Novak, pay attention," Lieutenant Colonel Rowe barked, his voice echoing in the sterile chamber. Tall and imposing, with a scar running down his left cheek, Rowe commanded respect through fear, rather than admiration. "Your psychological evaluation shows significant post-traumatic stress distortion. Not ideal for our purposes, but manageable." Jace stood at attention, his military training taking over despite the circumstances that had brought him here. A former soldier whose family had been lost to corporate conflict, he'd been deemed psychologically compromised and transferred to Zeta-11 for extreme conditioning. His combat skills were average, but his pride remained intact, perhaps the only thing they hadn't managed to strip away yet. "You're being assigned a training partner," Rowe continued, gesturing toward the adjacent holding room, visible through a one-way mirror. "Consider it your opportunity to prove your worth to this facility." Jace peered through the glass. Sitting calmly on a bench was a purple-skinned humanoid female. Her eyes were covered with a thin metallic band, blindfolded, or perhaps blind. Her posture was eerily still, almost meditative. According to the glowing display beside her chamber, her name was Yara. "An alien?" Jace questioned, struggling to keep the surprise from his voice. Rowe's lips curled into a cold smile. "The weakest specimen on the station, temporarily blinded from war injuries. You'll be expected to defeat her in the training ring to prove you deserve a place here." Jace studied the alien woman more carefully. Despite her apparent disability, something about her demeanor suggested hidden capabilities. Her hands rested gently on her knees, fingers occasionally twitching as if listening to sounds too faint for human ears. "She doesn't look particularly dangerous," Jace observed, a hint of confidence creeping into his voice. "That's what they all say," Rowe replied, his tone laced with amusement. "Marcus thought the same thing. Our most notorious former inmate lasted longer than anyone against a blind apostle. But in the end," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. The door to the observation room slid open, and 2 guards escorted Yara inside, up close. Her alienness was more pronounced, her skin a deep shade of purple with subtle patterns that caught the light, hair resembling fine silver filaments rather than human strands. Despite the blindfold, she turned her head precisely toward Jace, as if seeing him through other means. "Your new combat partner, Novak," Rowe announced. "Try not to get broken too quickly." Yara's lips curved into a subtle smile. "You'll last even less than he did," she said, her voice carrying a strange harmonic quality that made the hairs on Jace's neck stand on end. The challenge in those cold words ignited something in Jace. Determination, pride, perhaps fear. He would prove himself by conquering this supposedly weak alien. Yet something about her confident smile planted a seed of doubt, a sense that there was more to Yara than met the eye. "First session begins at 0600 tomorrow," Rowe instructed, turning to leave. "She'll destroy you faster than any inmate we've had before." As the guards led Yara away, she tilted her head slightly in Jace's direction. The enigmatic smile never left her face. The next morning arrived with the harsh buzz of Jace's quarter alarm. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying Yara's words and mysterious smile. The training facilities of Zeta-11 were designed to push inmates to their physical and psychological limits, transforming them into either weapons or recycled goods. Failure wasn't an option, not if he wanted to maintain what little autonomy he had left. The training ring was a circular arena with adjustable flooring and walls that could simulate various combat environments. Today, it was set to standard mode, a simple hardwood floor with high metal walls. Monitors above displayed vital signs and performance metrics, a constant reminder that everything was being evaluated. Jace entered the ring dressed in regulation training gear, lightweight and flexible, offering minimal protection. He performed quick stretches, warming up his muscles while studying the empty space. The door on the opposite side slid open, and Yara stepped in, accompanied by 2 guards. She wore similar training attire, though modified to accommodate her alien physiology. The blindfold remained in place, a thin metallic band wrapped around where her eyes would be. Despite this apparent disadvantage, she moved with surprising grace, each step deliberate and confident. Ro's voice boomed over the speakers. Objective: Novak must incapacitate the alien subject within 10 minutes to demonstrate competency. Failure will result in reassessment of placement. The unspoken threat was clear. Reassessment typically meant downgrading to less desirable positions within the facility's hierarchy, possibly even recycling. "Begin," Ro commanded. Jace circled Yara cautiously, studying her stance, her head tilted slightly, following his movements despite her blindness. He feinted left before lunging right, a basic maneuver designed to test her reactions. She sidestepped with uncanny precision, moving just enough to avoid contact. Jace pressed forward with a combination of strikes, a jab followed by a roundhouse kick, techniques that had served him well during military service. Yara moved like water, each motion fluid and economical. She ducked under his punch and seemed to listen as his legs swept through the air. At the last possible moment, she placed a palm against his extended leg and pushed, a gentle touch that somehow disrupted his balance completely, sending him sprawling to the floor. "What the hell?" Jace muttered, quickly rolling back to his feet. Yara stood in the same spot, that infuriating smile still playing on her lips. She hadn't even attempted to press her advantage. Anger flared in Jace's chest. He launched a more aggressive assault, throwing precision punches aimed at pressure points that would incapacitate most humanoid species. Yet, each attack met empty air as Yara twisted and turned with preternatural awareness. Her movements were minimal, using his own momentum against him. 5 minutes into the session, Jace was breathing heavily, while Yara remained composed. He hadn't landed a single significant strike. Frustration mounting, he changed tactics, attempting to grapple her to the ground. As his arms encircled her midsection, she exhaled sharply, and somehow, that breath carried a frequency that vibrated through his chest, disrupting his grip and causing him to stagger backward. "What was that?" he gasped, feeling a strange resonance lingering in his ribcage. "Just breathing," Yara replied, her voice carrying that same strange harmonic quality. "You're trying too hard to see what isn't there, rather than hearing what is." The cryptic response only frustrated Jace further. With a growl, he charged forward, abandoning technique for raw aggression. This time, Yara didn't simply evade. She pivoted on one foot, her hand brushing his shoulder as he passed. That light touch somehow contained enough force to redirect his momentum, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain shot through his shoulder as he collided with the metal surface. Dazed, he turned to face Yara, who stood calmly in the center of the ring. 7 minutes elapsed. Ro's voice announced over the speakers. "Novak, your performance is suboptimal." From an observation window, Jace could see Ro watching with several other officers. Their expressions ranged from amusement to disappointment. Only he lasted longer than one session with a blind apostle. Ro called down, obviously referring to the mysterious Marcus. Pathetic display, Novak. Something inside Jace snapped. The combination of humiliation, frustration, and the lingering effects of whatever sonic disturbance Yara had created drove him to abandon all strategy. He rushed her with reckless abandon, determined to make contact. Yara waited until the last possible moment. As Jace closed in, She turned her head slightly, as if listening to something in the distance. Then she opened her mouth and released a sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a song, a modulated tone that struck a specific frequency. The wooden floor beneath them vibrated. The barrier doors rattled. Rowe and the other officers visibly winced, clutching their ears as they stumbled back from the observation window. Jace dropped to one knee, his equilibrium shattered by the sonic disruption. His ears rang painfully, vision blurring as the sound penetrated his skull. The sensation triggered a flash of memory, sound chambers used for torture during his captivity years ago, vibrations that shattered not just eardrums but resolve. When the tone ceased, Jace found himself on his hands and knees, sweat dripping from his brow. Yara stood over him, head tilted curiously. "Session concluded," Rowe announced, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Novak, report to medical for assessment." As guards entered to escort them from the training ring, Jace noticed something odd. Yara spoke quietly in an alien language, the words meaningless to him, but carrying a strange resonance. What surprised him was Rowe's reaction. The lieutenant colonel froze momentarily, an expression of shock crossing his face before being quickly masked by military discipline. "Take her back to containment," Rowe ordered sharply. "Increase isolation protocols." As Jace was led to medical, he caught a final glimpse of Yara. Despite being manhandled by the guards, her posture remained dignified, and that enigmatic smile still played on her lips. Their first encounter had raised far more questions than it had answered. In the medical bay, a technician scanned Jace for injuries while inputting data into a tablet. "Interesting readings," the technician muttered. "Your auditory canal shows stress patterns consistent with exposure to targeted sonic disruption." "She made some kind of sound," Jace explained, wincing as the technician probed a tender spot behind his ear. "Not just any sound," a new voice interjected. Jace turned to see a tall, lanky man in a lab coat entering the medical bay. His ID badge identified him as Dr. Kelm, Xenobiology Research. "Subject Yara belongs to a species with highly evolved auditory capabilities," Dr. Kelm explained, reviewing the medical scans with obvious interest. "We've been studying her sonic modulation abilities since she arrived. Today's demonstration was unexpected in its intensity." "She's supposed to be the weakest specimen," Jace said bitterly. "That didn't feel weak." Dr. Kelm's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Weakness is relative. Novak. Her visual impairment should be a significant disadvantage, yet she compensates with audiospatial awareness beyond human capability." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been pressuring Rowe to allow more extensive testing of her frequency generation. Today's display will strengthen my case." Something about the doctor's clinical interest made Jace uncomfortable. He remembered the way Yara had been handled, not as a sentient being, but as a research specimen. "What exactly are you studying her for?" Jace asked. "Weaponization, of course," Dr. Kelm replied matter-of-factly. "Imagine tactical sonic disruptors that could incapacitate enemy forces without physical contact. The applications are extraordinary." His eyes gleamed with scientific enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. "Your continued sessions with her will provide valuable data." After being cleared by medical, Jace returned to his quarters, a sparse room barely large enough for a bed and minimal storage. On his tablet, he discovered a message had arrived during his training session. The sender identifier showed Sarah, a name that caused his heart to skip a beat. Sarah had been his teammate and closest friend during military service. They'd lost contact after the incident that left his psychological profile flagged for distortion. Opening the message felt like reconnecting with a life he'd almost forgotten. "Jay, heard they transferred you to Zeta 11. Concerning news. Their Apostle processing program has a reputation for breaking people. Word is, they're pairing you with the alien subject from the Cygnus conflict." Don't be fooled by official classifications. They're trying to weaponize her living sonic capabilities. If you get close enough, try to learn her story. You might find you have more in common than you think. Stay strong. So. Jace read the message 3 times before it automatically deleted. Standard protocol for external communications. Sarah's warning echoed what he'd already begun to suspect. There was more to Yara than a simple training exercise. That night, fragmented memories invaded Jace's dreams. Sound chambers where enemies had used sonic devices to break him. Vibrations that penetrated flesh and bone. Screams that never seemed to end. He woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. The phantom resonance of Yara's harmonic voice still echoing in his mind. The next training session introduced a new challenge, the Hell Labyrinth. Jace and Yara were placed at opposite ends of a maze-like structure with shifting walls, strobing lights, and continuous low-frequency vibrations designed to disorient. Objective: navigation and combat in adverse conditions. Rowe announced from the control room. Novak must incapacitate the subject before she reaches the exit point. The labyrinth was a nightmare of sensory overload. Flashing lights created disorienting shadows, while the constant vibration through the floor disrupted balance. Jace moved cautiously, sound-dampening panels in the walls, making it difficult to track movement by ear. He carried a training stun baton, non-lethal but painful, capable of temporarily incapacitating most species. His plan was simple: use the labyrinth's disorienting effects to his advantage against an opponent who relied on sound. 20 minutes into the exercise, Jace still hadn't encountered Yara. The labyrinth's configuration kept changing, walls sliding to create new pathways and dead ends. Sweat trickled down his back as he navigated another junction, senses straining for any sign of his target. A faint, harmonic hum reached his ears, barely perceptible above the labyrinth's ambient noise. He froze, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound grew stronger, resonating at a frequency that made the walls vibrate subtly. Rounding a corner, Jace finally spotted Yara. She stood with one hand pressed against a wall panel, head tilted as if listening intently. Her mouth was open slightly, emitting the harmonic tone he'd detected. Before he could approach, the wall beneath her hand began to shake violently. Metal groaned as the barrier buckled, then separated, creating an opening where none should have existed. Yara slipped through the gap, bypassing an entire section of the labyrinth. "That's cheating!" Jace shouted, rushing forward. By the time he reached the damaged wall, the gap had narrowed, though not completely closed. He squeezed through, scraping his shoulder in the process, and found himself in a corridor leading directly to what appeared to be an exit. Yara stood waiting, that now familiar smile playing on her lips. "How did you do that?" Jace demanded, raising the stun baton defensively. "I asked the wall to move," she replied simply. "Everything has a resonant frequency, the point at which it will vibrate most intensely. Find that frequency, amplify it correctly, and solid objects become cooperative." Jace lunged forward with the baton, determined not to be outmaneuvered again. Yara sidestepped, but this time he anticipated her movement, adjusting his trajectory to intercept her. The baton connected with her shoulder, delivering its electrical charge. Yara gasped, dropping to one knee. For a moment, triumph surged through Jace. Finally, a successful strike. But the victory was short-lived. Even as she knelt, Yara's body began to emit a low, pulsing tone. The sound spread outward in waves, interfering with the baton's electrical components. The weapon sputtered and died in Jace's hand, its circuitry overwhelmed by the precise frequency. "Disrupting electrical signals is more difficult," Yara explained, rising steadily to her feet. "But the principle is the same. Everything has a frequency that can be enhanced or cancelled." Before Jace could respond, alarms blared throughout the labyrinth. Red emergency lights replaced the strobing white ones. Exercise terminated, Rowe's voice announced, tight with controlled fury. Structural integrity compromised. Return to entry points immediately. Guards entered from both ends of the corridor, quickly moving to separate Jace and Yara. As they were escorted from the labyrinth, Jace noticed Dr. Kelm observing from a monitoring station, his expression a disturbing mixture of scientific fascination and predatory interest. Back in his quarters, Jace paced restlessly, replaying the events in the labyrinth. Yara's abilities defied conventional understanding, not just compensating for blindness, but manipulating physical matter through sound. The implications were staggering. A notification on his tablet interrupted his thoughts. New assignment details had been uploaded. Tomorrow's session would take place in the Sound Arena, a specialized training environment he hadn't encountered before. The briefing mentioned acoustic stress testing and resonance tolerance evaluation. Jace's stomach tightened as he read the details. The clinical language couldn't disguise the truth. Tomorrow would be about pushing Yara's sonic abilities to their limits, with Jace as the trigger and target. That night, as the facility's lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Jace lay awake, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. He'd come to Zeta 11 determined to endure whatever challenges were thrown at him, to prove his worth through obedience and skill. Now he found himself questioning the very premise of his assignment. Was breaking Yara truly a demonstration of strength? Or was he simply another tool in an experiment that treated sentient beings as weapons to be harnessed? A faint melody drifted through the ventilation system, so subtle he might have imagined it. Yara's containment cell was several levels below, yet somehow her harmonic voice carried through the station's infrastructure, resonating with the metal ducts and pipes. The alien song was unlike anything Jace had heard before, complex tones layered upon each other, creating patterns that seemed to bypass the ear and speak directly to something deeper. Despite himself, he found the sound soothing, easing the constant tension in his muscles and the ever-present ringing in his ears, a remnant of past torture. He drifted to sleep with the alien melody washing over him, and for the first time since arriving at Zeta 11, his dreams were not haunted by screams and sonic weapons. Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent lights and the metallic taste of recycled air. Jace performed his usual routine mechanically, mind preoccupied with what awaited in the sound arena. By the time guards arrived to escort him, a strange calm had settled over him, not resignation, but a clarity that had been absent before. The sound arena was unlike any training environment he'd seen. A perfect sphere with walls made of highly responsive acoustic material. Its interior was lined with speakers and microphones of varying sizes. The curved floor made conventional movement difficult, forcing participants to constantly adjust their balance. Rowe and Dr. Kelm waited at the control station, accompanied by several technicians monitoring various displays. Today's exercise is straightforward, Rowe explained, his tone clipped. You will engage the subject in the arena for 5 minutes. Your objective is to provoke a maximum sonic response. And if I fail? Jace asked, already suspecting the answer. The subject will be administered neural inhibitors that will permanently suppress her sonic capabilities, Dr. Kelm interjected, adjusting settings on a control panel. A waste of potential, but we can't allocate resources to subjects that don't demonstrate sufficient value. And if I succeed? Jace pressed. Rowe's smile was cold. Then we move to Phase 2 of acoustic weaponization. Either way, you'll have proven your usefulness to the program. The implication was clear. Jace was as much a test subject as Yara. His performance would determine not just her fate, but his own continued status at the facility. Yara was already in the arena when Jace entered, standing perfectly still at the center of the curved floor. Her blindfold had been replaced with a more sophisticated device that wrapped around her entire head, presumably to monitor her neural activity during sonic generation. Begin test sequence, Dr. Kelm announced over the speakers. Jace approached cautiously, studying Yara's posture for any sign of the calm confidence she'd displayed previously. Today, she seemed more guarded, her body tense despite her outward stillness. "They want me to make you demonstrate your abilities," Jace said quietly, uncertain if the monitoring systems would pick up his words over the arena's ambient hum. "I know," Yara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's been the purpose from the beginning. Break the weakest to prove you're strong." "You're not weak," Jace stated, circling her slowly. "I've seen what you can do." A sad smile crossed her face. "Strength isn't what they think it is. Neither is weakness." Jace lunged forward, making a show of attacking while deliberately missing his target. Yara responded as expected, sidestepping with that uncanny precision. But this time, Jace noticed something different, a hesitation, a reluctance to unleash the sonic disruption she'd demonstrated before. 2 minutes elapsed, Dr. Kelm's voice announced. "Insufficient response detected. Increased provocation level." The floor beneath them suddenly tilted, throwing both off balance. Jace stumbled forward, genuinely colliding with Yara this time. They both fell, rolling across the curved surface. The physical contact triggered an instinctive response. Yara emitted a short, sharp, sonic burst that pushed Jace away from her. The sound reverberated through the arena, amplified by the acoustic design. Monitoring equipment registered the frequency pattern, displays lighting up with data. "Better," Dr. Kelm commented, "but still below demonstrated capacity. 3 minutes remaining." Jace regained his footing, mind racing. He needed to provoke a stronger response to prevent the neural inhibitors. Yet every instinct rebelled against forcing Yara into a defensive position. A memory surfaced. The sound chambers where he'd been tortured. The specific frequencies that had broken through his resistance. The same techniques were now being employed against Yara, with Jace as the unwilling instrument. Making a split-second decision, he charged forward again, this time bringing his mouth close to Yara's ear as they grappled. "They're recording frequency patterns," he whispered urgently. "They'll use them to develop weapons." Yara stiffened in his grip. "I know," she whispered back. "That's why I've been careful to never reveal my true resonance." Before Jace could respond, the arena's speakers emitted a piercing tone, a painful sound that drilled into his consciousness, triggering flashbacks of captivity and torture. He stumbled back, hands instinctively covering his ears. "Subject response amplification engaged," Dr. Kelm announced clinically. "Psychological stress patterns activated." The sound intensified, modulating to match the specific frequencies that had been used to break Jace during his previous captivity. His knees buckled as the sonic assault triggered a cascade of traumatic memories. Through watering eyes, he saw Yara approach, her expression concerned despite the blindfold covering her eyes. She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his forehead. What happened next defied explanation. As the torture sounds continued from the speakers, Yara began generating a counter-frequency, a sound that precisely canceled the harmful waves, creating a bubble of acoustic calm around them both. More than that, her touch seemed to channel a different kind of resonance directly into Jace's mind. Memories surfaced, not the tortured screams of his past, but earlier moments. Laughter with Sarah during training, his mother's voice singing childhood lullabies, the peaceful rustle of leaves in the forest where he'd grown up. "You don't understand who we're fighting," Yara said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos of sound and memory. The monitoring stations exploded with activity as sensors detected the complex frequency patterns Yara was generating. Dr. Kelm's excitement was palpable, his fingers flying across control panels to capture and analyze the data. "Extraordinary," he exclaimed. "She's generating at least 7 distinct harmonic layers simultaneously. The neural pathway activation is unlike anything we've recorded." Rowe watched with narrowed eyes, his focus less on the scientific readings and more on the unexpected cooperation between the subjects. "Terminate the test," he ordered sharply. Separate them immediately. Security personnel entered the arena, moving to pull Yara away from Jace. As they approached, she turned her head toward them and released a concentrated sonic burst that knocked them off their feet without causing permanent harm. Ro's hand moved to his sidearm. Contain the subject. Non-lethal force authorized. Jace, still reeling from the combination of induced trauma and Yara's healing frequencies, found himself standing protectively in front of her. "She's not the enemy," he shouted, voice raw with emotion. "The real enemies are the ones who turned her into a tool." Dr. Kelm's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't damage the subject. Her value as a sonic template is incalculable." Yara rose to her full height, removed the monitoring device from her head, and began generating a tone unlike anything Jace had heard before. The sound started low, almost below the threshold of hearing, then rapidly climbed in both volume and frequency. The acoustic walls of the arena began to vibrate, then crack. Monitoring equipment shorted out in cascading failures. The security personnel dropped their weapons, hands clasping their ears as the precisely modulated sound targeted their equilibrium without causing permanent damage. Ro raised his weapon, preparing to fire a warning shot, but the spreading resonance disrupted his aim. He stumbled, the pistol wavering in his grip as Yara's sonic assault continued. The control room windows fractured, forcing Dr. Kelm and the technicians to retreat as alarm systems throughout the facility blared to life. In the confusion, Jace grabbed Yara's hand. "Now's our chance," he urged, pulling her toward the exit as security systems failed around them. They fled through corridors thrown into chaos by the facility-wide alarms. Red emergency lighting cast everything in a crimson glow as they navigated the labyrinthine passages of Zeta 11. Security personnel scrambled to respond to multiple system failures, paying little attention to two figures moving purposefully against the tide of confusion. "We need to reach the lower levels," Jace explained, as they ducked into a maintenance shaft to avoid a squad of armed guards. "There's an old drainage system that connects to the exterior." Yara nodded, her hand still clasped in his. Without her blindfold, Jace could see her eyes for the first time, iridescent purple with pupils that expanded and contracted like camera apertures, adjusting to gather whatever limited light they could process. "You can see?" he asked, surprised. "Barely," she admitted. "My vision was damaged during interrogation, not completely destroyed. It's slowly healing, but sound remains my primary sense." They descended through rarely used maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security would be heaviest. Twice, they encountered locked doors, which Yara opened by generating precise frequencies that disrupted the electronic locking mechanisms. As they reached the lower levels, they discovered they weren't alone in their escape attempt. Other inmates had seized the opportunity created by the facility-wide disruption to make their own bids for freedom. Small groups moved furtively through the shadows, some eyeing Jace and Yara with suspicion, others with hope. "We can help them," Yara whispered, sensing Jace's hesitation. "My frequencies can disable security checkpoints for everyone, not just us." A difficult choice confronted Jace. Including others would complicate their escape, increasing the risk of capture. Yet leaving fellow inmates behind felt wrong, especially now that he understood the true nature of Zeta 11's processing program. "All right," he decided, "but we need to move quickly. Once they realize what we're doing, they'll shut down the entire drainage system." They gathered a small group of the most vulnerable inmates, those who, like Yara, had been classified as weak due to injuries or disabilities. Among them was Serena, a former nurse who had lost her voice during corporate experimentation, Baylor, an engineer missing an arm, and Thera, a female warrior with severe burn scars covering half her body. Together, they navigated the lowest levels of the facility, following Jace's memory of emergency evacuation plans he'd studied during his early days at Zeta 11. Yara used her sonic abilities to detect patrols and security measures, allowing them to avoid direct confrontation whenever possible. When they reached the massive drainage pipes that channeled waste and rainwater away from the facility, Jace used a maintenance access code to open the initial grate. Beyond lay a network of large tunnels, dark, damp, and smelling of rust and stagnant water, but leading away from captivity. "The outer checkpoint is automated," Jace explained, as they splashed through ankle-deep water. "Heavy security gates designed to prevent exactly what we're attempting." Yara touched the tunnel wall, feeling the vibrations traveling through the metal. "I can sense it ahead. Multiple layers of reinforced barriers." The group paused at a junction where the tunnel widened into a collection chamber. Ahead, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting, loomed the first of the security gates, a massive steel barrier designed to withstand both escape attempts and outside intrusion. Yara stepped forward, placing both hands against the cold metal. She closed her eyes, listening to something only she could hear. "Everyone, cover your ears," she instructed. "This will be intense." The sound she generated started as a deep, thrumming bass note that made the water around their feet ripple with concentric patterns. Gradually, the tone shifted upward, searching for the precise frequency that would match the gate's natural resonance. When she found it, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive barrier began to vibrate, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. Dust and rust particles showered down as the vibrations loosened decades of accumulated grime. Metal groaned in protest as molecular bonds stressed beyond their limits. With a deafening crack, fractures appeared across the gate's surface. Yara maintained the tone, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort of such precise frequency control. The cracks spread, connecting into a web-like pattern, until finally, sections of the barrier crumbled inward, creating an opening large enough for people to pass through. Yara staggered as the sound ceased, momentarily exhausted by the concentrated effort. Jace caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight against his side. "That was incredible," he murmured, genuine awe in his voice. She managed a weak smile. 3 more gates to go. By the time they reached the final barrier, the one that would open to the outside world, facility-wide alerts had been issued. The sounds of pursuit echoed through the tunnels behind them, boots splashing through water, and voices shouting commands. Yara prepared to breach the last gate, but hesitated. "They're close," she warned. "I'll need time to break through this one. It's reinforced differently than the others." Jace made another difficult decision. "Go," he told the other inmates. "Take Yara and keep moving. I'll hold them off." "No," Yara protested, grabbing his arm. "We all escape or none of us do." The determination in her voice left no room for argument. Instead of dividing their forces, they prepared a different strategy. Baylor, using his engineering knowledge, helped create an acoustic amplification chamber using debris and tunnel geometry. Thara and Serena positioned themselves as lookouts, while Jace collected discarded maintenance tools to use as improvised weapons. When the security forces arrived, led by a grim-faced Roe, they encountered not helpless escapees, but a coordinated resistance. Yara, positioned at the center of Baylor's acoustic chamber, generated defensive sound waves that disrupted communication devices and disoriented the approaching guards. Jace and Thara held the narrow tunnel approach, using their combat experience to maximum advantage in the confined space. The security forces, expecting easy prey, instead found themselves facing determined opponents, fighting for freedom. The battle was brief, but intense. Roe, recognizing the tactical disadvantage, ordered his forces to fall back and regroup, likely planning to return with heavier weapons and sonic dampening equipment. The momentary reprieve gave Yara the time she needed. Placing her hands against the final barrier, she closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, accessing frequencies she had carefully hidden from her captors. The sound she produced this time was different, purer, more fundamental, resonating not just with metal, but with the very molecules of air and water surrounding them. The final gate didn't just crack, it disintegrated, molecules vibrating apart until the barrier simply ceased to exist as a unified structure. Beyond lay the outside world, a barren landscape of metal scrap desert surrounding the facility, but with distant hills promising cover and potential freedom. Exhausted, but elated, the group emerged into the harsh sunlight of late afternoon. Yara, her eyes still sensitive, squinted against the brightness, leaning heavily on Jace for support. "We need to reach the border of Zeta 11's territory," Jace explained, orientating himself by the position of the sun. "There's a dried riverbed that runs along the perimeter. If we follow it east, we should reach the forest by nightfall." The escape had only just begun. Facility security would soon organize a proper pursuit, likely with aerial support and tracking equipment. Their head start was measured in minutes, not hours. They moved as quickly as possible across the unforgiving terrain, helping those who struggled with injuries or exhaustion. Yara used her acute hearing to detect approaching vehicles or drones, allowing the group to take cover when necessary. By sunset, they had reached the dried riverbed Jace had mentioned, a deep channel cut through the earth, its banks offering some concealment from aerial observation. As darkness fell, the distant lights of Zeta 11 facility glowed ominously against the night sky, a reminder of what they had left behind and what still pursued them. The group continued their journey through the night, following the riverbed toward the promised forest. Exhaustion and hunger took their toll, but the taste of freedom, even precarious freedom, drove them onward. Dawn found them at the edge of a sparse forest, trees offering better concealment than the open terrain they had crossed. Here, they allowed themselves a brief rest, taking turns standing watch while others caught moments of precious sleep. During his watch, Jace found Yara sitting beside him, her improved eyes studying the lightening sky. "Why did you help me?" he asked quietly, the question that had been bothering him since their escape. "I was sent to break you." Yara's expression softened. "Because I recognize something in you, the same thing they tried to break in me, the capacity to hear beyond what they wanted you to hear." "The music you played through the ventilation system," Jace realized. "That wasn't random." She nodded. "It was a healing frequency from my homeworld. We call it the Song of Remembrance. It helps reconnect fragmented memories, especially those shattered by trauma." "It helped with the nightmares," Jace admitted. "For the first time in years, I didn't hear the screams from the sound chambers." "Those chambers," Yara said softly. "They used similar technology on my people, trying to break us, to turn our natural abilities into weapons." She touched his hand gently. "When I said you wouldn't last as long as Marcus, I meant you wouldn't remain their tool for as long as he did. I sensed your resistance, your capacity for compassion despite everything they'd done to you." The revelation stunned Jace. What he had interpreted as a challenge had actually been a prediction of his liberation, not from physical imprisonment, but from the mental chains that had bound him to a system built on exploitation. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by Baylor's urgent return from scouting. "There's a settlement ahead," he reported, excitement in his voice. "It's flying the resistance banner." They had found what they were seeking, a resistance station, one of the hidden outposts maintained by those fighting against corporate dominance. Here, they might find not just sanctuary but allies in the larger struggle. The resistance station was well camouflaged, built into natural cave formations and augmented with scavenged technology. Guards initially regarded the escapees with suspicion, but the presence of former prisoners from Zeta 11, a facility notorious even among resistance fighters, earned them cautious welcome. Inside, they found a community of survivors and fighters, many bearing scars similar to their own. Medical attention was provided for those needing it, including specialized care for Yara's still healing eyes. As days passed, Jace and Yara integrated into the Resistance community, sharing intelligence about Zeta-11's operations and capabilities. Of particular interest was Yara's knowledge of sonic technologies and how they were being weaponized. The corporations aren't just using sound as a torture device, she explained during a strategy session. They're trying to develop wide-area acoustic weapons that can pacify entire populations without leaving physical evidence. My species' natural abilities provided them with a template. "Can it be countered?" asked the Resistance leader, a scarred veteran of corporate wars. Yara nodded. "Every frequency can be nullified by its opposite. With the right equipment, we could create defensive measures, perhaps even turn their own technology against them." A plan began to form, not just to hide from their pursuers, but to strike back at Zeta-11, disabling their sonic research program and liberating the hundreds of other inmates still trapped within. Using salvage technology and Yara's unique knowledge, the Resistance engineers constructed a crude but effective sonic resonator, a device capable of amplifying and directing the frequencies Yara could generate. The plan was audacious. Use a precisely calibrated sonic attack to disable Zeta-11's security systems, allowing a small team to infiltrate and free the remaining prisoners. The night before their planned strike, Jace found Yara sitting alone by a small stream that ran near the Resistance camp. She was humming softly, the sound causing the water's surface to form intricate patterns that caught the moonlight. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I've been preparing for this since they first put me in that sound chamber," she replied. "Using what they tried to weaponize to free others from the same fate? There's a symmetry to it that feels right." Jace nodded, understanding her sentiment. "When I first met you, I was determined to prove myself by defeating you. I thought strength meant domination, control." "And now?" Yara asked, her partially healed eyes reflecting the starlight. "Now I understand what you meant about strength and weakness. True strength isn't breaking others. It's in protecting those who can't protect themselves." He paused, gathering courage for what he wanted to say next. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. You didn't just help me escape physically. You helped me escape what they were turning me into." Yara's hand found his in the darkness. "In my culture, we believe that the most powerful frequencies are those that harmonize rather than destroy. Tomorrow, we'll demonstrate that truth." The assault on Zeta-11 began at dawn, when security shifts changed and systems briefly reset. The Resistance team approached from the unguarded drainage outlet they had escaped through, which facility maintenance had only partially repaired. Yara, positioned at the center of their formation, activated the sonic resonator. The device amplified her natural abilities, sending precisely calibrated frequencies through the facility's infrastructure. Metal supports vibrated, electronic systems faltered, and communication networks dissolved into static. As planned, the attack targeted systems, rather than people, disrupting operations without causing the loss of life that would trigger a more severe corporate response. Security doors malfunctioned, containment cells opened, and monitoring stations displayed nothing but snow. In the confusion, Resistance fighters moved through the facility, guiding bewildered inmates toward freedom. Dr. Kelm's prized research data on sonic weaponization was corrupted beyond recovery by targeted frequency pulses that demagnetized storage systems. Rowe, attempting to organize a defense, found himself trapped in the command center as doors sealed randomly around him. His communications to corporate headquarters were garbled by the sonic interference, preventing the arrival of reinforcements. The liberation took less than an hour, a surgical strike that freed nearly 200 inmates and destroyed years of unethical research. By the time facility systems began recovering, the Resistance team and the freed prisoners were miles away, dispersing into the wilderness in small groups to avoid easy tracking. The corporate response was predictable but ineffective. Zeta-11's operations were temporarily suspended, pending investigation. Rowe faced inquiry for the security failure, while Dr. Kelm's research credibility collapsed with the loss of his data and test subjects. 2 weeks after the raid, Jace stood by the riverbank at the edge of the Resistance territory, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The sounds of morning surrounded him, birds calling, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, water gurgling over stones. Footsteps approached, and he turned to see Yara joining him. Her eyes had continued to heal with the help of alien medical technology provided by Resistance allies. Though not fully recovered, she could now see well enough to navigate without assistance. "The scouts report no pursuit activity for 3 days," she said. "I think we're safe, at least for now." Jace nodded, taking in her appearance, the relaxed posture, the absence of tension that had characterized her during captivity. "What will you do now?" he asked. "There are other facilities like Zeta-11, she replied. "Other places where people are being broken and weaponized. The Resistance has asked if I would help plan similar liberations." "And you said yes," Jace guessed, seeing the determination in her expression. Yara smiled, not the mysterious, enigmatic smile from their first meeting, but an open expression of hope. "I told them we would help, if you're willing." The offer shouldn't have surprised him, yet somehow it did. In the weeks since their escape, they had worked together, fought together, but never explicitly discussed what would come after. "I'd follow you anywhere," he said simply. "You showed me what real strength is. I want to keep learning." She reached out, taking his hand. "I told you that you wouldn't last as long as he did," she reminded him. "But here you stand." Jace squeezed her hand gently. "And you've given me a reason to keep fighting." Together, they watched as the sun rose fully above the horizon, casting long shadows behind them while illuminating the path ahead. The journey that had begun with a challenge in a training ring had transformed into something neither could have anticipated. A partnership forged in adversity, strengthened by understanding, and dedicated to ensuring that no one would ever again be broken for the crime of being considered weak. In facilities across the corporate territories, word spread of the liberation at Zeta-11. Whispers of hope circulated among inmates and guards alike. Stories of the blind alien who could shatter walls with her voice, and the soldier who chose protection over domination. Their legend grew with each retelling, becoming a symbol of resistance against a system that valued weapons over people. For Jace and Yara, the future remained uncertain, but purposeful. They had discovered that true strength lay not in breaking others, but in helping them rebuild, a lesson they would carry forward as they continued their fight for those still waiting to be freed.